More Than a Wolf, The Wolves of Lupine Falls Book 3. Copyright 2022 by Miranda Bailey. Chapter 1. Elissa. Charlotte, North Carolina. 2030. Awareness. That was the word that burst into my mind as the hairs stood up on the back of my neck and I started to look around the hotel lobby. Awareness of something other. I looked around the tasteful, but expensively decorated lobby, trying to find the reason for that awareness. Normally, I knew what it was, what it meant, but this was different. This awareness was powerful and unlike anything I've felt in the last 11 years. It was unlike anything I'd felt even before I'd left Lupine Falls to find a better life all those years ago, one without a dictatorial alpha with a wife that treated our pack like slaves rather than family. There was another wolf in the hotel, one that my wolf was very aware of. But why? I found him at the counter, talking with one of the staff members at the check-in desk. She was new and her name was Amber, I think. Blonde with engaging brown eyes, she blushed prettily as she spoke to the man that now glanced at me with curiosity in those blue eyes that drilled into me. A flicker in those eyes told me he knew what I was, knew that I didn't belong here. But then, either did the man with curly black hair that was long on top but shaved to the skin on bottom. Oh, his clothes fit in well with the overpriced labels that the other guests in the hotel wore, but something about the way he wore them told me he wasn't used to such finery. He looked as if he was used to wearing the rough, cheap clothes from the sectors that used to be cities and states but were now wastelands. I pushed the vacuum further out into the lobby, wishing Livia had done her job properly so I wouldn't have to come down to clean the floors again after I'd spent the entire morning cleaning my assigned rooms. But I decided as I turned the vacuum on and started to push it in neat lines along the red carpet, if she had done her job properly, I wouldn't be staring at a man that looked like nothing but trouble. The kind of trouble I needed to avoid. So why couldn't I keep my eyes off of him? Why did I feel him? Because he's a wolf, you nitwit, my inner wolf replied calmly. She was always calm, even when I felt like screaming my head off. I managed to keep my eyes down after that, or tried to. I heard Amber laugh at something the guy said when I turned off the vacuum to move it to the other side of the lobby, nearer to the plug on that side. Something deep inside of me twitched at the way she laughed and looked at him with wide, delighted eyes. A primal feeling took over and I hated Amber? What the hell was that about? Confused, I looked away, not wanting to feel any of this, but I knew it had something to do with my wolf. The wolf I'd suppressed for a very long time to hide in this world of pure humans that would kill me or use me as a science experiment, if I ever gave myself away to them. It was bad enough the magical wars had spilled over into the human world, destroying vast swathes of the United States, leaving it in sectors as the warlords that managed to retain control shared the spoils of what was left without being revealed for what I was. I've upgraded you to the penthouse suite since our system glitched, Mr. Ramirez. Amber said in a husky voice with a cute little wink to charm the man my wolf wanted me to get much closer to. He looked around with a subtle twist of his head, keeping track of me, watching me. His smile was as charming as Amber's with straight white teeth that I caught a glimpse of as he turned his head away, back towards her. I'll tear her throat out if she ever winks at him again. I stepped back, turning away from both of them, appalled at my wolf's thoughts, appalled that I'd enjoyed the image of transforming into my wolf, jumping up on that desk, and tearing the young woman's throat out. I turned on the vacuum, hoping that my work would distract me and the wolf that lived within me as an almost separate entity. I could no longer hear their conversation, but it didn't matter, the animal inside me still concentrated on that man, concentrated on getting closer, as though she was willing him to come to me. To claim me? I tripped over the power cord, nearly falling flat on my face, but a strong hand grabbed my right forearm, a hand that sent shockwaves of delight up my nerves from the moment it touched me. I knew who it was before I looked up, before I caught sight of his expensive shoes and the tailored charcoal gray pants he wore. Was that flannel? I wondered stupidly, while my eyes traveled up his body. He wore a black t-shirt that probably cost more than my entire annual rent for the hovel I called home over a muscular torso that rippled as he moved. Are you all right? He asked, his blue eyes filled with as much concern as his deep, southern accented voice. Damn, I love his voice, my wolf purred inside of me, all but rolling over within me before she flopped over to hunch down on her front paws with her tail in the air. Calm down, I ordered the normally stoic wolf and tried to keep a straight face. I'm fine, thank you, I responded, my ears hating the slightly deep tones of my voice. I'd always hated my voice because it wasn't high and pretty like some women's, but then, there was very little that was delicate about me. Even the icy violet hue of my hair came off as aggressive, somehow, instead of ethereal and fey. Be careful, accidents happen quickly in these times. The man with eyes that seemed to have penetrated my very soul said, his eyes searching over me once more, as if he needed to find something that he couldn't clearly see. I knew what he was searching for and tried my best to hide it even more. He wasn't taking in the plain red work top I had on or the black slacks that were the uniform provided by the hotel. He was taking in what I was. He was looking for my secrets, the ones that I knew I couldn't hide from him but tried my best to subdue. But my wolf was inside of me, twisting and turning in delight over the fact that this man, this shifter, had touched me, was inspecting me, had seen me for what I was. I wanted to let her out just so I could slap her. It seemed I was in a mood for slapping today. First the girl at the checkout desk and now my own wolf. Slap him, see if he drags us to his room and has his way with us, my wolf urged, her liquid voice vibrating in my inner ears but unheard by anyone else. Only, the man's eyebrows lifted, as though he had indeed heard my wolf, those vivid blue eyes of his boring into mine again. A very knowing smile twisted his lips up before he covered his mouth and looked away from me before he looked back, his eyes narrowed as he examined me intently again. Thank you, I'll try to remember that. Have a good day, I finally answered as I tried to dismiss him, knowing company rules insisted that staff of my level should be all but invisible to our customers, yet, here I was, making a scene. Or rather, my wolf was. He stood there, however, not looking away, not moving, just watching me. Why are you here? He wasn't asking me why I was working in a hotel, or even why I was in Charlotte. He was asking why I wasn't with my pack. Females very rarely left their packs in my world, but times had changed since my parents' time, when life wasn't a constant struggle just to survive. That struggle had started within my own pack, and then, later, in the outside world as well. Trying to survive. What are you doing here? I hissed back, looking down at my left wrist as he grabbed it. The same. Come to my room later, when you're off work. I'd like to speak with you. He pressed something into my hand before he stepped away, going back to the desk. I turned away from everyone, looking at my palm. It was the keycard for his room. Did he think I was a prostitute? Oh, hell no, I thought, looking up at him with murder in my eyes, but I saw a plea there, something more than mere lust. I slid the key into my pocket with a slight nod, then wrapped up the cord to the vacuum, ready to get out of the lobby and out of sight of anybody, guests and my superiors alike. There was no way I was going up to his room. None at all. Was there? I left him in the lobby, walking quickly to the elevator to get away from prying eyes. His prying eyes. What the hell was that? I wondered out loud, knowing there'd be no answer from anyone but the wolf that lived within me as an almost separate being. Another wolf. Duh. That bitchy cow inside of me muttered, prowling the edges of my consciousness, looking for a way out. No shit, Sherlock. You're so observant, I sighed as the elevator surged down to the basement levels. There were 3 sub-basements below the lobby floor, one housed equipment that might be needed in the hotel, another housed office spaces and rooms for the executives of the hotel, and the very last one, the darkest, coldest, loneliest floor was where lowly workers like me lived. For a price. My shift was over, and I could spend it however I wanted to, so long as I wasn't in sight of any of the hotel guests or the management staff. I could even go outside to explore what remained of the city, if I so chose. I didn't want to go out there, though. Charlotte was once a thriving banking center of the country, a shiny place filled with people from all walks of life and a vibrancy that many other parts of North Carolina were missing. Now, it was a military outpost, in the hands of an insane human warlord that didn't realize his wife was a sadistic shifter bent on stamping out shifters of any kind. Even those of her own family. The woman wasn't supposed to be in our world anymore. She was supposed to be imprisoned in the magical place we'd all thought was a myth, until Jaina, the wife of my clan's leader, was taken there by the wife of our warlord. Rhonda had escaped that place, with the help of rebels within that world, and had brought with her destruction, pain, and the end of a country that had once stood great and powerful. Who could have known that a woman that many insisted was nothing but an inept bully could bring about so much death and destruction? I'd heard about Jaina and her marriage to the new leader of the Wolves of Lupine Falls with hope. I'd even considered going back to Lupine Falls for a time. I'd heard through the grapevine in those first years about how different Keziah was to his father, about how life was improving for everyone in the clan. But then Rhonda escaped, and everything had changed, for everyone. Somehow, the magicals of my world had managed to disguise the ongoing war between factions as an insurrection, between the southern parts of the United States and the northern parts. I guess it wasn't that hard to pull that off when the country was so divided at that point anyway. I'd been on the verge of going back to my people, back to my clan, when the war broke out and I'd become trapped in Charlotte, all but enslaved by the people that took over the running of the hotel for the elite that remained within the city's walls. Walls that human slaves built. I shuddered as that thought brought a pall of darkness over my soul. I'd have never guessed that when I left my clan at 17 that everything I knew would change so much. That people would devolve, go back to inhumane institutions, would bring back something so heinous as human bondage. Yet, as I looked around my room, a room that I could barely manage to pay for, even though I worked here, I knew it had always been possible. The only thing stopping people from doing it before was the fact that it was illegal. The war brought about the end of the U.S. Constitution, at least to this part of the country. Women and minorities were little more than property again. I had the papers to prove it. I had to carry around a certification from the hotel that I was employed by them and bonded to them, so that I wouldn't be picked up and thrown into jail as a runaway slave. If I left the district, however, and I was stopped, I would be sent back to the hotel, even if I didn't want to ever go back to the place. They owned me. It was a nightmare world, really, one I often hoped to wake up from. That never happened though. The nightmares of my sleep carried on every moment that I was awake, and I'd learned to stay quiet, stay out of the way, stay invisible. Until that wolf walked into the lobby this morning. What was he doing here? What was he after? And why had he slipped me his room key? I plopped down on the cot I called a bed, stuck my foot on the opposite wall to prop it up, and looked at the metal cabinet that served as my closet at the foot of my bed. That was the extent of the room I rented for 3/4 of my wages. Enough room to turn around in with a cot and a small cabinet. Not for the first time, I wished I'd stayed in Lupine Falls. From the little bit I'd heard, the clan was doing all right. If I could escape, I would go back there where I might have some semblance of freedom again. But if I'd stayed, I might not even be alive now. With a heavy sigh, I put my left forearm over my eyes and tried to shut out the world with my headphones in my ears, music blasting from my 10-year-old phone, the last one I could afford to buy. Everything was so strange now, so dangerous. If I ignored the man's request to go his room tonight, he could complain to management and get me fired. Then I'd be sent to the slave markets in downtown Charlotte, and that was a fate I could not allow. Not just because I would be a real slave, which was horrific enough, but also because I was a wolf shifter. That could never be discovered by the humans. So, what could I do but go to his room tonight and hope for the best? I tapped the plastic card against my left hand, knowing I was in deep trouble.